All right, what's up, everybody? Episode 6, Blake and Vish Sports here. We got Nolan, so Hoops with Nol. Episode 6, we got the whole cast together. We got Vish back on, me and Nolan. We try to do this every week. Vish can't always make it, but we got him here today. He's a busy man. We got the NBA trade deadline today. A lot of moves, honestly. Some crazy ones out of nowhere. The first one, the Bulls made this, so they traded Otto Porter, Wendell Carter, a 2021 first-round pick and a 2023 first-round pick for Al-Farouq Aminu, and then the main guy, Nikola Vucevic. We're going to start with you, Noel. What are your initial thoughts on this trade? We can go from the Bulls angle first.
Yeah, so, I love everything about the trade. One of my favorites has got to be just Vucci Mane, the man himself.
Great name.
But also, I am going to miss the man, Otto Porter. He was pretty knocked down this season from his shots. But Wendell Carter, he's a young guy. He's got potential. He could be better. But this season, he was atrocious. It was tough for me as a Bulls fan to watch the Bulls and how little he's improved from last year. And just not having any sort of a force down low to go against other teams' bigs. We'd get abused night in, night out. And having Vooch is just going to do us so much wonders and take so much pressure off Levine. So those are my initial thoughts. But what did you guys make of the trade?
Vish?
Yeah, I think the Bulls have a legit big two to make a playoff push. I think Zach LaVine has kind of been a lone star. I feel like there's a lot of really good young players on the Bulls that we've kind of thought are talented for a couple years. Like I know Kobe White finished the season strong last year and people were super excited, and that really hasn't materialized where he has some good games. He's really inconsistent and a little inefficient. Lauri Markkanen has teased with offensive potential his entire time in the NBA, but injuries and lack of consistency once again has held him back. Now the Bulls have two legitimate number one scoring options. Big Vooch and Zach LaVine are probably the two most underrated offensive players in the NBA, because I don't think people have realized how both their games have evolved. They're both terrific shooters from three. Zach LaVine is shooting 43.7% from three, and Big Vooch is shooting 40.6% from three. That's pretty ridiculous. I think that the Bulls are going to make the playoffs because they got Big Vooch, and I think that they have two legitimate all-stars.
Okay, interesting. So I'm with you on, just a huge addition. I felt like this also came just, out of nowhere. This wasn't really on the radar for anyone, and it just happened, and it was the first big thing. So that was just exciting as a Bulls fan. What I think was the best part about this trade for the Bulls is what they gave up. So Otto Porter, he's been inconsistent with injuries. Pretty solid player though all around, maybe a little overpaid you could say. Wendell Carter, I'm with Noel on this one. I liked him coming into the draft. I never thought he'd be insane, but I thought he'd be a pretty good average center. He just has not looked the part. He really hasn't. Whether it was Tony Bradley not missing a shot against him, Jokic, any big or even somewhat talented offensive center is giving him trouble, and he's not aggressive on offense. It's an issue. And then the two first, right? So this year's first will probably be at the very best for the Magic. It'll be a low-end lottery pick. And then in 2023, I still think our team's going to be good and we'll probably be making the playoffs then. So, the first-round picks, we're not really going to be missing those too much. I do have a little concern with the future for the Bulls in the sense that do they plan on just having this as their big two? Because I don't know if this is enough to go deep, Eastern Conference Finals and play championship game into the postseason in the future if these are the only two big stars they have. What do you guys think about that?
Oh, I could jump in. I would say I definitely agree with it, and I think it's going to have to be when you're looking at, because we have the talent now to be in the dance in the playoffs, but in terms of beating the contender teams, definitely could come up short. So it comes down to the three guys who have the most potential to be that third guy or to be an elite, just star, borderline, just very great player in the league, and that's Markkanen, that's Kobe White, and that's Pat Williams. And I think each has kind of shown flashes. I would say Markkanen's been pretty inconsistent, but he still does show flashes, and I think one of those guys is really going to have to step up. And I think having guys though on the team like Vooch and the man Thaddeus Johnson Thaddeus Young, and veterans to kind of like show those kind of guys how to take the game to the next level could help a lot. But I think it's going to have to be among one of those three. What are your thoughts, though, Vish?
Yeah, I'm with you. I think it's going to be those three. I do think, like you said, the Bulls have kind of a defined ceiling, and it's nothing against them, but there's only top 10 players in the NBA. And typically to go to an Eastern Conference Finals or Western Conference Finals, you need one of those top 10 guys. And I love Zach LaVine. I love Big Vooch. I would say both of them are outside of the top 10 when it comes to the top 10 players in the NBA. And the other thing with the Bulls is that the one thing they're going to have to do is, because I think scoring is not going to be a problem. Like Lauri Markkanen still averages 18 points a game, even though he's not become a legitimate second option next to Zach LaVine. Like Pat Williams is 10 points a game. Kobe White's averaging 15 points a game. So they're able to score the basketball. They even get 10 a game from Satoransky. Their problem is, I think the question is, can they play defense? And Big Vooch isn't the greatest of defenders. He's a solid one, an average one. Zach LaVine sometimes can be a little lackadaisical while playing defense. Kobe White can be inconsistent. I think that's where Pat Williams is really going to have to be that guy, because he's the guy that's got the traits to be not just a good defender. He can be an above average one and possibly an all NBA type one. But ultimately, if you look at the East, right, I think we agree that Philly has two elite franchise cornerstone type players. I think Milwaukee has one. Boston has kind of fallen off, though they have two kind of pretty special wings. And that's where I say, like, there is opportunity. Like, Miami's good. Miami's not great. There is opportunity here for the Bulls, but not this year because they've started off poorly, but the next year with Big Vooch, Zach LaVine, a more developed Pat Williams, maybe Kobe White starts to get more consistent, and Lauri Markkanen stays as he is. There is opportunity for the Bulls to really, really try and be a top 4 or 5 team in the East. I think that's definitely a possibility.
Yeah, I'm with you. And then any more thoughts on their ceiling, Nolan?
One thing I would say that is an interesting just factor is Vish was mentioning the defense. He also mentioned the Celtics, who there was some trade that happened with them.
Yeah, that's nice.
Originally, after sending off Wendell, we were going to have Mo Wagner, who we got in a trade with the Wizards, going to us. But we traded him pretty quickly, it seemed like, for Daniel Tice, who Daniel Tice seems to be kind of a hit or miss guy when I bring up in most conversations. But I like the guy a lot. I think he's undersized, yes, but he's just a defensive anchor for a team that, as Vish said, can put the ball in the hoop, but does need guys to step up on the defensive end. So I don't know how much more he elevates the Bulls' ceiling, but I do think having more defensive presence, and even Al-Farouq Aminu is not a bad defender. I think having more defensive presence is going to be the factor on how high the Bulls' ceiling will be.
I agree with that. And I actually have a question for both of you. And before I ask that question, I will just elaborate just a little bit on Tice. I think Tice has been an underrated player for Boston. He's improved his shooting where he is capable of shooting the occasional three-point shot. He can make a 15 to 18-footer. He's a solid free throw shooter. He plays really hard. He's a good screen setter. I think he would be exactly what the doctor ordered for the Bulls coming off the bench, because he'll bring energy too. So between Lauri Markkanen and Nikola Vucevic, the Bulls will be doing something interesting where they'll be starting a real power forward and a real center. Not many teams in the NBA typically do that now. What would have been a small forward 15 years ago starts as your power forward. Well, between Lauri Markkanen and Nikola Vucevic shoots 40% from three. Lauri Markkanen shoots 39% from three. Is this the greatest shooting front court of all time?
You say it all the time, Bulls or all time?
In general, I don't think we've ever seen two 7-footers shoot this well from three and play on the same team next to each other.
No, it's definitely a great point. I think the stats could make a case. They are the best or in the conversation. I don't know the stats and others. I would say maybe Paul Millsap's are Jokic and Millsap maybe a better 3-point shooting, but I would say they're in the conversation for sure. Both of them have straps. Blake, what are your thoughts?
All time would be pretty rich in my eyes. I would have to sit down and investigate it more. Like off the top of my head, I feel like there's been lineups in the NBA where maybe they do go a little smaller and they just, have a small forward at power forward that can shoot the lights out. But for a pure center and power forward, in the NBA right now, it's very modern where you can have all 5 guys outside of the 3-point line and run sets or like run ISO that way, which is like really interesting. But yeah, I don't know about best all time. I'd have to look into that more, to be honest, but it's an interesting thought nonetheless.
Yeah, I mean, obviously it's going to be the best. It's going to be, I think, all time always sounds a little scary to hear because you're trying to think through the years and years of history. But unfortunately, you're not going to find many shooting. I mean, up to post like pre 2014-15, you're not going to find a big man combination where both the center and the power forward take 7 threes a game and shoot about 40% from 3. Like that was guard stuff prior to then. So that's one thing. The point you brought up about Jokic and Millsap is interesting. The thing with the two of them is that while Jokic shoots 42% and Millsap shoots 38%, they don't take the attempts. Like Vucevic shoots 7 a game and Lauri Markkanen shoots 7 a game. On the other hand, Millsap shoots like 2 and Jokic shoots 3.5. Yeah. So I actually think this is going to be crazy to watch because the Bulls spacing, typically when you start a power forward and a center, right? It's especially in today's NBA, people are thinking both the blocks are occupied and your spacing is going to be a little less than adequate. I mean, think about the 17 Thunder, the year Russell Westbrook won an MVP. They were starting a rookie Domantas Sabonis and Steven Adams, which felt like alien even at that point in the league. Yeah. So their spacing is going to be interesting because they'll have all 5 players playing on the perimeter when in their starting lineup, and they're starting with size 2 7-footers.
No, that's interesting. And then real quick before we hop off this, how far do you guys think, or what seed do you think the Bulls can get by the end of the season? Right now, they're a little bit out of the playoffs. Maybe they can make the play-in, but do you guys think they could get up to like a 6 or 7 seed in the East?
I would say it's definitely possible. I think there's definitely room enough in the season, and if this is one of those things, it's an instant click where Vooch just kind of fits in and play style works. I think they definitely could go on some mini runs. I mean, this is a team that's like been in so many games, they just can't close out games. So I think they're literally right there, and this move is obviously going to put them over the ceiling they used to have, and I think so it's going to give them a chance to actually close out games. So I could see them being, I would say 7-6 seed range at top. I don't think they're going to get any lower of a seed than that. But Vish, what are your thoughts?
So right now they're right there for the play-in, right? They're the 10th seed. But the thing in the East is that you have 3 elite teams in the Sixers, the Bucks, and the Nets, right? 3, I would say, teams that have an opportunity to maybe win the ship this year, with the Nets being obviously the favorite. And then you have the Hornets, the Heat, the Knicks, the Hawks, the Celtics, and the Pacers. And the Bulls are basically 3 games out from 4 and 2.5 games out from 5. Now, with the addition of Nikola Vucevic, I genuinely think Boston is a sinking ship right now. Yeah. The Pacers are a solid team, but I don't think much of them is besides a team that's going to be in the play-in. I do think that the Bulls are a better team than the Hawks, though the Hawks have been playing incredible basketball lately. I do think the Bulls are better than the Knicks, though the Knicks just continue to consistently be playing good basketball. And then I think the Bulls can – so I think there is a good chance that the Bulls are anywhere between 6 through 8. And I wouldn't be surprised if they're right there at 6 because honestly for them it's about finding consistency. But in terms of raw talent, the Bulls do have a rotation of 8 like pretty darn talented players on the roster, something we haven't been able to say in a long time.
Much agreed. Awesome. Now, I think that wraps up the Bulls. The next topic, did we want to go to the Magic? So, Vish, what are the details on all the details, I guess, on the Orlando Magic trade deadline moves?
Right. So we know that they traded Big Vooch to the Bulls. Yep. We just talked about that, right? Big Vooch to the Bulls. And then they also traded Al-Farouq Aminu. They basically traded everybody. They traded Aaron Gordon for R.J. Hampton and Gary Harris plus a first-round pick. They traded Evan Fournier, who's consistently, whenever I watch the Magic play, be their best perimeter scorer. They traded him to Boston. So they basically traded out what I think most people would agree were the 3 best players. Mm-hmm. But the thing with the Magic is that I feel like they've had a lot of young talent that they've drafted, whether it's getting Fultz, whether it's drafting Mohamed Bamba. Whether it's Jonathan Isaac when healthy, looking like a guy who could be possibly a defensive player of the year candidate for years to come. And now they get a guy in RJ Hampton, who I know a lot of people loved his talent coming out of high school. Like, now that they've shipped off these 3 veteran players who are all quite good, but I think they've all kind of hit reasonably close to their ceiling, what do you think of the Orlando Magic for the future, and who are you excited to watch?
You got it, Noel.
Yeah, I'll hop in. So, yeah, in terms of the Magic of the future, I think in terms of who I'm excited to watch, I got to go with the man, the myth, the Mo Bamba. Got a song already. He's just an electric player. And I'm happy for him, too, because I really do think he has potential, but behind Vooch is tough. But I do think he probably learned a good amount, so it's going to be curious. Him in the spotlight. And then other players, I'm really excited for Isaac. I think he's just one of the most unique in all-around players in the game. And if he can stay healthy, he's definitely a game changer. But overall, I just really like the move because I think the Magic knew they weren't going to make any sort of late playoff runs with their roster, especially going up against like a team like the Nets. Like, I just don't think the Magic could ever beat the Nets. So I think it's going to be super cool to see how players develop. But Blake, you got any players in the Magic or people you're excited to watch for the future?
Yeah, I think Mo Bamba's a pretty good player, or just like someone who has the potential to grow where in the past he hasn't. And then one guy that we haven't really, I know is mentioned, but Markelle Fultz, like, I want to see what this dude can be as like the number 1 option. Like, he's, I think he's injured right now. Correct me if I'm wrong there, but he was playing really well at the beginning of the year. I think it was ACL, right? Or
he tore his ACL,
yeah.
Out for the season, bro.
He was playing really well up until that point. I want to see what he can do as the number 1. And, since he got over from the 76ers, like, he's gotten a lot of confidence back. His shooting, he's starting to figure it out a little more. And, he looked like a straight baller at Washington, and he didn't, obviously continue that at the Sixers. But I think the overarching thing with the Magic that I like is they're kind of admitting, all right, we're not getting much better than the 7th or 8th seed. Let's not stay in this little area where we have an aged roster. We're going to get a late lottery pick. Instead, we're just going to scrap it, go young. We know our team's not going to be that great. We're just going to rebuild for a couple of years. I would rather my team do that than sit in that like 7 to 8 seed zone where you just go up against the Nets and you're getting waxed 4-0. Or in their case, they go up against the Raptors, win game 1, and then, lose the next 4. So I really do like this for the Magic in just the sense that they're admitting like this past roster wasn't good enough to go far in the playoffs, and they can finally move on. But Vish, what do you got?
Yeah, so you guys named him. I'm most excited to see first Markelle Fultz. I liked Markelle Fultz coming out of Washington. He's got a great handle. He's pretty explosive. He's got a good feel on passing. I mean, his mid-range jump shot is starting to find itself. That 3 ball is still not falling for him. The free throws are still kind of shaky. But, yeah, for the most part, he was getting his confidence back, which is incredible because usually I thought Markelle Fultz's career was done when he got shipped from the Sixers. Just because, I mean, think about it. He was basically our age, and the whole world basically was telling him that he sucked at something he's been very good at for a long time in his life. And, that's pretty rough. I'm really excited to see Jonathan Isaac, too. I was sad that Jonathan Isaac got hurt. I'm someone who believes that Jonathan Isaac has the potential to be the best defensive player in the NBA. That's how good I think he can be. I think he's so disruptive. Like, you look at what Ben Simmons is doing right now, I think most people would agree on the perimeter. Ben Simmons is the best defensive player in the NBA for sure. I think that's what the potential of Jonathan Isaac is like. He's so disruptive. He's so long. He's so athletic, and he's shown flashes and glimpses of his stellar defense. And then finally, you guys mentioned him. It's Mo Bamba. I liked Mo Bamba a lot before the draft. He's super long. He's super athletic. He put weight on his body, he was very thin when he came out. And I don't think he's been bad at basketball when he's in his limited opportunity, when he's been able to play for the Magic. He's not looked like a guy who doesn't belong. He's just not gotten that kind of opportunity. I remember when he was coming out in the draft, people compared him to Rudy Gobert because of his length and athleticism. They thought he could be that dominant of a defensive player. Well, now the Magic just cleared the books, and they've got a lot of young talent. Like, I liked Chuma Okeke at Auburn. I thought he was tough. He was pretty nice in the NCAA tournament and everything, so I think he's another guy that could fit. Never being the biggest Cole Anthony fan, but he was one of the top players in high school for a reason, so he's got a lot of talent. So now the Magic have a lot of young talent. They're going to be a fun team to watch because I think a few of these guys are going to be household good players by the end of the next couple years.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, one thing I would add, though, that we haven't talked about, too, is another player they just got in a trade, which is R.J. Hampton, who could definitely make some noise, and is a very fun player to watch. He's a pretty flashy player, very young. So I would say two guys that I'm very curious. I think Fultz, kind of this season, if he stays healthy, he's kind of making a name for himself already. But I'm very curious if Cole Anthony or R.J. Hampton, one of those two, can kind of make the step up and complement Fultz on that backcourt. I'm very curious how those two play out.
And then to add to that, like, some of the guys they got are actually like pretty solid, just like veteran presence that are like gel players in my opinion, like Gary Harris and like Otto Porter. Like they're not going to need to take. They're not like Melo or another guy who needs the ball in their hand. Like they can play off ball and have these other young guys like, you know, be the playmakers and have high usage rates while they're, you know, there for defense and they can hit like they'll hit open jumpers and stuff like that. So like. It's like a pretty good gel and like scheme build in my eyes in that sense.
Yeah, I think Otto Porter's biggest problem in every stop he's been is the fact that he's always paid like a max player, even though he's something less than. But the thing with Otto Porter is that he shoots. He can shoot it really well, making him a solid fit with anyone. And I think that when you have Markelle Fultz, who's been a struggling shooter, Jonathan Isaac was really turning a corner with his shooting before he got hurt. And R.J. Hampton, who's an explosive athlete, not the best shooter. Cole Anthony, who's struggled with his jump shot. I think having a consistent shooter like Otto Porter is a good fit for them. And I'm excited to see how the Magic develop. I think it's going to be super interesting to observe.
Yeah, the only other thing I would just add then is I think one thing with Fultz too is just from Philly to the Magic, regardless of how he plays, I think he's just comfortable there, which is such a big thing for his career because of just getting absolutely Philly fans are just going after him, and I just think that sucked, and I'm happy for the man.
Definitely. Right, that's a tough town for him to be less than. Yeah. So I think we've kind of hit on the Orlando Magic. So there were some other pretty big moves in the Western Conference that we wanted to touch on, and the first one is the Los Angeles Clippers trading for Rajon Rondo. So we knew that the Los Angeles Clippers were in heavy pursuit of Rajon Rondo this offseason as a free agent, fresh off of winning his, I think, second ring with the Lakers. And for whatever reason, the Atlanta Hawks signed Rondo. I never understood what they wanted from Rondo. I mean, Trae Young plays, 37, 38 minutes a night, and he monopolizes the ball for all 38 minutes he plays. So I never understood why they wanted Rondo. Rondo hasn't really played for them. He's been injured. And now they traded him for Lou Williams and 2 second-round picks. So let's talk about this from the Clippers' perspective. What does it mean for the Los Angeles Clippers title prospects by acquiring Rajon Rondo?
No, you got this one.
All right. So, I mean, I think if nothing else on the top layer, it's just they're all in for the title, which I think most people thought. But I do think my favorite part about the Rondo trade is that you look at the Clippers and you look at playoff and you're like, yeah, playoff P, is he going to do it? Are they going to show up? But we got playoff Rondo now on this Clippers team, who is a bad man. Like, playoff Rondo, people can joke about it if it's a real thing. I've watched a lot of Rondo in the playoffs. I think he's one of the most clutch and just higher performer guys in big games. I think he's going to help a lot. And I think it's as much as Lou Will is a good player too, I think Rondo with the ball is going to benefit their two best players in Kawhi and PG a lot more than Lou Will or Pat Bev could have done. I think that's going to really elevate them the most in my eyes. What are your thoughts though, Blake?
Yeah, so I'm with you on that. Like, Rondo's a way better playmaker for others than Lou Will is. In, speaking of playoffs, so we know playoff Rondo, I fully believe in it. Like, I think he honestly just, like, maybe it's effort or he tries harder because NBA regular season at times can be kind of dull and not the most meaningful. But obviously playoffs is meaningful. That's the end goal here. And Rondo has another gear. But I think if we look back and remember some of the playoff series with Lou Will, I don't remember him playing particularly well himself. He's not the best defender to start with. Rondo's, I feel, a pretty good defender. even though he's a little older. And Lou Will wasn't even shooting that great. So what's the main purpose for having him if he's not going to be an asset on the offensive end or on the defensive end? So I think that makes a lot of sense. And then playmaking, like I mentioned, like this team desperately needs a playmaker. I still think they could benefit a lot more from if they had someone better than Rondo. Like me and you talked about Lowry, or even I know they're going after Lonzo. Like I think those guys would be better playmaking abilities than Rondo per se, but Rondo's still a better playmaker for others than Lou Will. So I love it from their perspective. Vish, what do you think?
I love this move. So to touch on your points about Lou Williams, if you remember, Lou Williams, for whatever reason, could only score in the road in the playoffs. He was, for whatever reason, always struggling to score at home. He didn't have a very good bubble last offseason. And I think what happens to Lou Williams in the playoffs is that his physical limitations in terms of his size and stature and the fact that he shies away from contact and his defensive, I think teams just start to go and wear him out by going at him possession after possession on defense. So for a guy like him, he's not the most ideal player for them in the playoffs. I think Rondo makes a massive impact. Now, I don't know how much of an impact he's going to make in the regular season, but I do know he's going to make a massive impact in the playoffs. And it's for three reasons. One, the Clippers are the best three-point shooting team in the NBA. So you know that they share the ball, right? You got Paul George, who's shooting 43% on catch and shoot threes. You got Patrick Beverley shooting 44% on catch and shoot threes. You got Kawhi Leonard shooting 48% on catch and shoot threes. So when they move the ball around, they're able to knock down shots. The discrepancy with that is that they're 19th, or I want to say 19th in the NBA in assists. Yeah, they're 19th in the NBA in assists. Rajon Rondo averages 8 assists a game for his career, so that's going to go up. Second, the Clippers, even this year, they've had trouble closing games, and it's because they lose sight of their ball movement when they're closing games because it becomes a kind of your turn, my turn, ISO type offense. And for a guy like Kawhi Leonard, a rhythm player who likes to get to a spot, if you can throw a double team at him or you can disrupt his timing, it basically screws up the Clippers' closing possessions. And then Kawhi doesn't look like a great scorer because he has to or a great closer because he has to take a bad shot or he's out of rhythm and he passes it and throws the ball away. Well, Rondo's going to change all of that. And if you look at Kawhi's success, he's had success in his career. I mean, he won a championship playing with Tony Parker, who's a true point guard who can create offense for others and knows how to run an offense at the end of the game. You look at Kyle Lowry, just a veteran, tough, pit bull point guard with a high IQ who knows how to create offense and run an offense at the end of the game. And Rondo is kind of the same way. And then the third thing is that playoff Rondo thing is such a real thing. And here's what I think. I think, one, Rondo doesn't try in the regular season. And two, I think the playoffs is more conducive to Rondo's style. Rondo has a high IQ and Rondo controls the pace of the game. In the regular season, it doesn't matter as much to control the pace of every game. I mean, you have the James Hardens and the LeBrons who do it every single night, but you can win games without necessarily controlling when the game speeds up, when the game slows down. In the playoffs, it's so important. There's a reason LeBron James always dominates in the playoffs because he takes the ball and he dribbles the air out of it because he knows he can control when people shoot, who shoots when, what kind of shots you're taking, and he controls every single possession like that. Rondo doing that for the Clippers is going to help a lot. I think it'll also help Paul George because I think there'll be less ball handler pressure on him and a little less pressure on him to go one-on-one. I think this is a massive move for the Clippers.
Yeah, one thing I would say I definitely agree with those takes. And one thing I think that Rondo provides too, and you were saying is how much he brings to the offense and getting guys in rhythm. And I also look at sometimes just the Clippers, like when they have nights where PG doesn't shoot well or Kawhi doesn't shoot well, and Rondo almost being like a revival card. Whereas like if these guys aren't shooting well, Rondo can make so much of a playmaker that he could get a guy going maybe just from his passes alone. And then once, I don't know, either of those just superstars find the rhythm, then it's usually going pretty good for the team. But just Rondo being such a good playmaker that could really just spur those other guys in the team at any moment, which I think is just cannot be understated.
And then one more guy I wanted to throw in there who I think benefits a lot from that we're not really going to talk about is Ivica Zubac. He doesn't really have a guy to run the pick and roll with, and he's pretty good at running a pick and roll. The dude catches everything for some reason. I don't understand it.
Hands.
He really does, and he has good touch around the rim. Like he is definitely a liability on defense. He gets torched, but they have Serge Ibaka for that role. And Ibaka on the pick and pop too will be really nice. So I think Zubats gets honestly like a pretty nice boost from like having like a more traditional playmaking point guard, because we know Pat Bev is like a pretty good defender and all of that, but like he is very severe, he is severely limited on the offensive end and what he can like create for others. So yeah, man, they're looking really nice right now, to be quite honest with you guys.
Yeah. I'm interested to see what their closing lineup will be in the playoffs, because I'm assuming it's going to be some combination of Rondo, Kawhi, Paul George, and then the question is it going to be Ibaka, Marcus Morris? Is it going to be Batum, Marcus Morris? Is it going to be Batum, Ibaka? Is it going to be Pat Bev, Marcus Morris? It'll be interesting to see. I think Kennard has actually fallen out of the rotation a little bit, though. Terrence Mann has been playing really, really good basketball when he comes on for them. Tough, gritty defender, and he's been shooting the lights out, which I didn't expect from him when I saw him at Florida State.
Yeah, definitely. So that's kind of the Clippers topic. Definitely a pretty interesting trade, like just all around. And then the last one we wanted to get to, I know Vish got some strong opinions on this one. So the Trailblazers traded Rodney Hood and Gary Trent Jr. for Toronto Raptors Norman Powell. Vish, I know you got a lot to say on this one. We're going to start with you. What are your thoughts on this and just the overarching ideas on the Trailblazers?
So originally I thought this was a terrible trade, solely because I'm a big Gary Trent fan, and I think that one more year from now, I thought Gary Trent would be the perfect two guard next to Damian Lillard because of his length, his size, his defense, and his shooting. But the more and more I think about it for the Blazers right now, I think it is an improvement in terms of this year. And here's why. So from three, Gary Trent and Norman Powell are offering similar percentages. Now, they're both shooting around 44%. They're both, Gary Trent's 42% catch and shoot. Norman Powell's 44%. I think where their big difference comes is their ability off the dribble. They're both good defenders, right? Norman Powell is very athletic, very explosive, good defender. I think it's Norman Powell's ability off the dribble. He just offers a little more shot creation, a little more athleticism around the rim. And I think the Blazers have severely always lacked that tertiary perimeter guy where they can throw him the ball and when the pick and roll gets trapped and he can go attack the rim strong and draw a foul or score, because when the pick and roll does get trapped, you're really playing 3-on-2 basketball, and the Blazers have never been able to capitalize against it. So that's one thing that I'll say, or that I would say. I think it's a good move. I think there is an overarching point to the Trailblazers that we do need to get to on what this really means, because I think Gary Trent or with Norman Powell, they kind of ceiling themselves out as the max they can do is win one playoff series.
Noel, what you got?
I would agree. I think the trade makes sense. I think Norman Powell could be better than Gary Trent. I don't think he's going to be so much better. And I think although this trade could spur and change up the dynamic in some ways, I think it doesn't do enough to go against the kind of the overarching question, which I think impacts another guy on the team in CJ McCollum, and is as good as Dame is, and everybody knows Dame's good. Can those two be an effective backcourt on both ends of the ball against contender teams? And how much is Norman Powell going to help them? I don't know. But what are your thoughts, Blake?
All right. So Norman Powell here. I think the main thing that I like about this, I know Vish, he's got the 3-point percentages, and that's like definitely a big factor, right? I think they just need to get new blood in there, and having a guy who's been on a winning team, played exceptionally well in that 2019 run for the Raptors, had some clutch moments. I think that's big for them, just like having, more experience in the playoffs. And then, yeah, I think you brought it up, Noel, so we can transition to that. But, I guess the overarching thing is, with the way the Blazers team is constructed, they have a whole lot of offense. They don't got really much defense at all. Pretty much just Norman Powell out there, I guess you could say. So, yeah, do you guys think this is a big issue? And are they still ceilinged as a team with having CJ, having Dame? They're not the best defenders. Nurkic isn't the best defender. They got Hoodie Mello off the bench. Who's not a good
defender?
Enes Kanter is maybe the worst defender, who's a big man. Although the man snags offensive boards, there comes a point where it's not valuable. So they still struggle heavily with defense. Do you guys still think that this does really much for their overall ceiling or fate?
No, and I think the Portland Trailblazers needs to make some massive changes this offseason. I'm sick of seeing this happen to Damian Lillard. So let me put out some facts here. Until they got Robert Covington, when they acquired him this year, is the first teammate Damian Lillard has played with that's made an All-NBA defensive team. The first. I mean, you look at Damian Lillard's counterpart, Steph Curry, not to make this a Dame versus Steph conversation. Klay Thompson, All-NBA defender. Andre Iguodala, All-NBA defender. Kevin Durant, All-NBA defender. Draymond Green, Defensive Player of the Year. Andrew Bogut is an above-average defensive player. So those are the kinds of players he's played with. That's one thing. Two, I hate the Blazers style. It's just high pick and roll, high pick and roll, high pick and roll. Dame, CJ, high pick and roll. Dame, CJ, high pick and roll. And really, the reality of what happens is that when you play a good playoff team that traps the pick and roll, i.e. the Warriors, they trapped it with Klay Thompson and Draymond Green, and you force Dame to get the ball out of his hands, the Blazers offense dies. Like, okay, I can see a scenario where Carmelo Anthony gives you one game where he just gives you 30, but it's not sustainable. I mean, they had a playoff run where their two starting wings were Mo Harkless and Al-Farouq Aminu, and if you trap the pick and roll, the Blazers offense died. And you look at it like that, and I just don't understand their style. And when the pick and roll is getting trapped, they do nothing. I mean, you look at when they lost to everybody blames Dame when they lost to the Pelicans. If you play high pick and roll basketball, and Drew Holiday is one of the best perimeter defenders in the NBA, especially at that time, and you're going against Anthony Davis, who's maybe the best pick and roll defensive player in the NBA, and what you're doing is running high pick and roll against them every single time, what do you think is going to happen? You're going to struggle to score the basketball, and Damian Lillard had one of the worst series of his career. So stylistically, I have a problem with that. We've gotten to the defense, right? I think the defense is a problem around Damian Lillard because Damian Lillard himself is not as maybe an average defender, if you want to say the average is a large spectrum in the NBA, but he's not a good defender. The problem is that CJ McCollum is also an average to slightly above average defender. And CJ McCollum offensively, while he's got a very pretty game that requires a ton of offensive skill, he's got a great handle. He's great with both hands. He's got a floater. He's got a mid-range game. He's clearly worked on his game. He lacks the high-end athleticism and the ability to take over a game when Damian Lillard is getting trapped and the ball is getting out of his hands. And that's where I think Portland at some point needs to get away from this two big man approach with Zach Collins, Nurkic, get some smaller, faster defensive talent with ability to switch, get some more shooting around these guys. I think Norman Powell is a good move in that direction. And they need, I think at some point Terry Stotts needs to go. Like, if you remember for Steph Curry, again, not a Dame versus Steph conversation, but Mark Jackson, I mean, we see him on TV. All he wants to do is play high pick and roll basketball. And that's all he did with Steph Curry. And Steve Kerr bringing in a little bit of motion changed Steph Curry's career because it altered the spots that he was able to get his shots and put less pressure on him to dictate the entire offense. And I think that Terry Stotts is a little bit of Damian Lillard's Mark Jackson here. And I would appreciate if they got a new coach and they got an influx of new talent. Otherwise, I think as good as Damian Lillard is, I think there'll always be a 4 to 6 team in the West that loses after one playoff win. And maybe in a weaker West, they go to the Western Conference Finals or something.
Noel, what you think?
I agree. I think, that was a good amount of detail by the man Vish, but I think it's just not a winning formula that the Blazers are making. And I think it really stems on defense. They got Covington, who was a good defender, but their first one, he's still pretty old. So if I'm looking at their team, unless Derrick Jones Jr. becomes Dennis Rodman, I don't see them going that far in the playoffs. Unless Dame can catch fire, which we all have seen and he's done. But if you can't get it done on both ends of the floor, you're not going to hang with contenders. I think it comes down to that. What about you, Blake?
Yeah. So like off of Vish's point, every time you watch a late game Trailblazers, it is the most back and forth basketball of Dame hitting a 30-footer and then the other team either bricking shots, hitting a three. No, sorry. They're either hitting a three, hitting an open jump shot, or they're getting an offensive rebound and doing the same thing back and either dunking it or layup. Like, so back and forth, like late game scenarios, they're just not good. It's almost like they're just, hitting their head against the wall and trying to break it or something. Like, they keep doing the same thing over and over. And I think to Vish's point, like at some point, like you just gotta do something else. Like, it's just not working. It's proven time and time again that it's not working. And please get a big man for the Trailblazers that is like above average on defense. Say what you want about Hassan Whiteside. I know he gets the blocks and stuff, but I'm still not willing to say he's one of, a really, really good defender here. And whether that's getting rid of Nurkic or Cantor, like either or, like they need to get some defensive help at center because right now teams are just scoring on them at will.
Yeah, and I think the larger point also is that stylistically it's the words out on how you stop the Portland Trailblazers. And everybody wants to say, oh, Dame sucks in the playoffs, Dame sucks in the playoffs. Well, if you run high pick and roll basketball, if you run pick and roll 50 times in a game and 40 times Dame gets trapped and he's making the correct basketball decision to pass out of it and not force anything, and you have nobody else that can create any offense, well, then what is Dame really supposed to do in the playoffs? So stylistically, they have no adjustment when you trap the high pick and roll. I mean, you look at them this year, I think their record is a little it's just Dame. Because the reality of it is that every game's a close game, and Damian Lillard is having one of the greatest clutch regular seasons we've ever seen. I mean, in terms of clutch percentage, any advanced metric you want to look at Damian Lillard in the clutch, what he's doing is just insane. Like, every game is close, and then Damian Lillard hits a massive three from 35 feet, and the Blazers win. That's not a sustainable way to play. And one thing I do want to see is I feel like there's too many veterans on that team, like Robert Covington, who's clearly lost a step both on offense and defense. Melo is effective when he plays, but he's still a poor defender. So if Melo's giving you 2 on one end, he's probably giving up 2 on the other end. It's always been the case with him. And so I feel like Nasir Little, when he's played the little time he's been able to play, he shows something because he's got the skill set to be a guy that plays power forward or a power forward in a small ball setup that can switch across the board because he's got high level athleticism. He shot the ball decently when he's played, so that's one guy I'd like to see more of. And then Anthony Simons, to me, has the physical profile to be a good defensive player. He shot the ball extremely well. I'd like to see his minutes get up. I'm so sick of seeing, when they're healthy, Nurkic and Zach Collins play 30, 35 minutes a night. There's no use of playing 2 7-footers in today's NBA with all the switching.
Yeah. One thing I would just jump in there. I just have a quick question for you two, and I'm sure you're familiar with the TNT crew. So Charles Barkley, the man, the myth, earlier in the season predicted the Trailblazers will win it all. He said this knowing all the stuff we've talked about. What does it say about Barkley's credibility? Like, can we take this man serious? What do we think of this take? What are your boys' thoughts?
I can go first.
Sure, go ahead.
He said this the last 4 years. I think saying it every time I really like the Trailblazers coming in. And in 2019, I think they hyped him up a little too much when they made it to the Western Conference Finals, and he was on his high horse. They did get swept. They blew a 10-point lead in the third quarter. I think probably every single game. Even from a weekend Warriors teams, I don't know. Chuck's funny in that sense, and I'd expect next year you're going to hear the exact same rhetoric and how the Trailblazers are new and improved. So I'll be looking out for that next offseason for sure.
Yeah, first of all, Inside the NBA is a fantastic show, and they definitely have a ton of insight. They do offer it. But for whatever reason, Charles Barkley is infatuated with the Portland Trailblazers. It's not even Damian Lillard. I think it's the fact that they still are willing to trot out a true power forward and center. It reminds Chuck of his era. But for whatever reason, every season, he guarantees, hey, let me tell you, earn it. The Portland Trailblazers, they're going to win the championship. I remember in 2019, bro, the Portland Trailblazers were down 15 at half to the Oklahoma City Thunder. This is Paul George's MVP candidacy year. And you guys know I'm a big Russell Westbrook fan. So I'm watching Inside the NBA, my eyes glued to the TV, expecting them to say something nice about Russ and Paul George and what they were doing. Because the Thunder were the 3rd seed in the West at the time, and they're up 15 against a good Portland Trailblazers team. No. Instead, Chuck goes, hey, let me tell you, I love the way these Portland Trailblazers are playing. I guarantee that they're going to win. So he does that. I mean, he has an infatuation with the Trailblazers for whatever reason. I think you can win a championship 100% with Damian Lillard. I think there's no doubt about that. I think that he's a special player that might never get the appreciation in terms of legacy for how special he is if they just continue playing this style with putting these kinds of teams around him.
Yeah, no, I mean, Charles is a funny guy. I love Charles, but some of his takes, I think, a little bit iffy to say the least. So I was definitely curious your boys' thoughts on the Barkley man.
For sure. I think that's gonna wrap up this episode of Hoops with Noel. So we covered the Bulls, Magic, Clippers, Trailblazers for a little bit. We'll be doing another episode sometime soon, and we'll cut these videos or cut clips of these videos of this video up into shorter vids, so you can watch them there if you missed any part of that. Thanks for coming, and come back next week for more Hoops with Noel.